This is a real-life story. All names have been completely removed due to serious security concerns and deeply personal reasons. The individuals involved remain in vulnerable and dangerous situations. All city and location names remain exactly as they occurred. He was the most powerful religious man in one of the most powerful mosques in all of Riyadh. For nearly 2 decades, thousands of men bowed in prayer behind him every Friday. He had watched executions. He had supported them. He had believed every single one was the will of God. Then the day came when they handed him the sword and told him to use it on his own younger brother. What happened next has never been fully explained by science, by physics, or by any human logic. Stay, because this story will change the way you see God forever. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from. Let's be one praying family across every nation. We need each other desperately. I want you to understand what I was before I tell you what I became. I am a 45-year-old man. For 18 years, I serve as imam of one of the largest mosques in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Every Friday, 5,000 people prayed behind me. My white tunic was always spotless. My turban was rolled with the kind of precision that only years of practice produces. When I walked through the marble corridors of the mosque, men lowered their eyes. Children pointed at me with a mixture of admiration and fear. I was powerful. I was respected. I was feared. And I believed, truly, completely believed, that everything I was doing was the will of God. That belief shattered on the night of April 3rd, 2020, at exactly 3:15 in the morning. My phone vibrated on the bedside table of my home in the exclusive Al Malkin neighborhood of Riyadh. Unknown number. Something made me answer. The voice on the other end was cold and official. It told me that my younger brother, 7 years younger than me, a petroleum engineer, the boy I had personally raised after our parents died in a car accident when he was 11 years old, had been arrested at King Khalid Airport trying to leave the country. They found Christian literature in his bag, a Bible. He had confessed to apostasy immediately. I sat in the dark for a long time after that call ended, holding the phone with both hands. I had raised that boy. I had taught him to pray. I had taught him to recite the Quran. I had shaped every part of his faith. And now, in the language of the kingdom I served, he was a dead man. The next morning I stood before the religious council in a stone and glass building in the heart of Riyadh. 7 men I had known for decades sat behind a long black marble table. I had shared tea with these men. I had laughed with them. That morning, their faces were stone walls. They told me my brother had been arrested with his wife and their 2 children, a boy of 12 and a girl of 9. All 4 wore small crosses around their necks. All 4 had confessed their faith in Jesus Christ without hesitation or shame. The eldest council member leaned forward and delivered the sentence with the calm of a man announcing whether public beheading, an example to all who might follow the same path. Then he told me something that made the floor disappear beneath my feet. He said that I, the imam, the elder brother, the keeper of our family's honor, would be the one to wield the sword. I would carry out the execution personally. I told him I could not. He is my brother, I said. We grew up together. He is all I have left of my family. The council member's response was immediate and merciless. He told me that if I refused, the execution would still happen, but it would not be quick or clean. My brother, his wife, and both children would suffer publicly in the worst way possible. And then I would follow them, all of us, together, making an example that no one in the kingdom would ever forget. I left that building carrying a weight that no human being should ever have to carry. I got permission to see my brother in Al-Hayar prison, a gray concrete complex on the outskirts of Riyadh. They led me through narrow hallways that smelled of disinfectant and something deeper and sadder that I could not name. He was sitting on the bare cement floor in an orange prisoner's uniform when I found him. He stood slowly when he saw me. What broke me was not his condition. It was his eyes. This man, who was scheduled to die in days, had eyes full of a peace I had never seen in any mosque, in any prayer, in any religious ceremony I had ever led or attended. It was the kind of peace that does not belong to this world. He reached through the bars and took my hand. His skin was cold, but his grip was steady. He told me he had found the truth. He told me that 2 years earlier, working alone in a remote oil field at midnight, a light had filled his tent, a light that came from no lamp, and a voice had spoken his name. He told me that everything changed in that moment. He told me Jesus was real, and that he had experienced a love he had never encountered in a lifetime of religious practice. I told him he was speaking blasphemy. But even as the word left my mouth, I knew it sounded hollow, because I was looking at a man who was about to die, and he was the most peaceful person in that entire building. Then he said something that followed me into my sleep for weeks afterward. He told me that if I had to use a sword to save his wife and children from worse suffering, he forgave me. He said he forgave me before I even raised it. He said that Jesus forgave the men who nailed him to a cross, and he could do no less for his own brother. I walked out of that prison and wept in the car like a child for the first time since I was 11 years old. April 7th, 2020, a Friday. just after the noon prayer, Dearest Square in Riyadh. Known to everyone simply as Justice Square, though justice was the last thing that lived there, the desert sun was merciless, turning the white marble into a surface that burned through sandals. Thousands of people filled the space, many forced to attend, others drawn by grim curiosity. A raised wooden platform stood in the center. My brother was already kneeling on it when I arrived, dressed in a plain white prisoner's tunic. Beside him, tied with rope, were his wife and his 2 children. The little girl, 9 years old, was crying silently, her small body shaking with sobs that were almost too painful to look at directly. Her brother, 12 years old, was trying to be brave, pressing his lips together, but his eyes gave away the terror that no child should ever carry. A guard approached me carrying the execution sword in a red velvet sheath. He drew it reverently and placed it in my hands. It was a masterpiece of Damascus steel, 90 centimeters long, 3 kilograms of forged metal, sharpened over months to cut a floating hair from the air. I had seen that sword, or one exactly like it, sever necks with a single clean blow. I knew the angle. I knew the speed. I knew the force. My hands remembered the training, even as my heart screamed against it. I positioned myself behind my brother. The crowd of thousands fell into complete silence. 5,000 people holding their breath simultaneously, creating a silence that was louder than noise. My brother turned his head slightly and looked at me. His eyes met mine. And in that look I saw forgiveness so complete, so genuine, so impossible under those circumstances, that something cracked open inside my chest. I raised the sword. Training took over where the will had collapsed. I brought it down with full force, and the blade touched my brother's neck and bent, like rubber, like soft plastic. The Damascus steel, forged over months, sharpened to cut through bone, curved completely upon contact with skin and caused not a single scratch, not a mark, not one drop of blood. 5,000 people gasped at the same moment. I stared at the sword. The blade had straightened itself again, perfectly, as if nothing had happened. The judge shouted for me to continue. I struck again, harder, with both hands, with every muscle in my back and shoulders. The sword bent again. Identically, impossibly, my brother remained completely unharmed, kneeling, his lips still moving in silent prayer. They brought a second sword, then a third, a fourth, a fifth, each one different weights, different ages, some centuries old, some modern. I struck with every single one. Every sword bent without exception. Every blade curved against his neck like a willow branch, and then straightened again when I pulled it away, as if the steel itself refused to participate in what was being asked of it. By the 5th sword, the square had erupted into chaos. Half the crowd was shouting about witchcraft. The other half was whispering about divine protection. Officials were screaming contradictory orders. The religious council members were on their phones in open panic. Never, not once in the documented history of Saudi Arabia, had an execution failed in this way. In the chaos, something coordinated happened. Guards who had clearly prepared for this moment moved with purpose through the confusion. They cut the ropes binding my brother's wife and children. They lifted my brother from the platform. Within minutes, all 4 had disappeared into the crowd and were being driven toward the border in an unmarked vehicle. By the time the authorities realized what had happened, my family was gone. I remained on the platform, holding a useless sword, stripped of my robes publicly, put in an orange uniform in front of thousands of people, and loaded into the back of an open truck so everyone could witness the imam's disgrace. They put me in the same cell where my brother had waited for death. The concrete floor still bore the marks of where he had slept. For the first year, the interrogations were relentless. They wanted to know how I had done it, what chemical I had put on his neck, what trick I had arranged. I had no answers because there were none. Then came the psychological pressure, sleep deprivation, extreme temperatures, 24-hour lighting to destroy any sense of time, and weekly screenings of other executions carried out with the same swords that had failed with me. They forced me to watch, over and over, as the steel worked perfectly on other prisoners. The message was clear and cruel. The swords work. So what happened with you? What they did not understand was that every video they showed me was slowly dismantling everything I had believed for decades. I was watching the brutality I had defended as sacred. I was seeing the cruelty I had called divine will. And in my cold cell, alone with nothing but concrete walls and a collapsing theology, I began asking questions I had never permitted myself to ask before. If God truly wanted my brother dead, why had he stopped it so publicly? In my second year, in the absolute darkness of that cell, I whispered into the silence. I told Jesus, if he was real, if it had been him who bent those swords, that I needed to know. I said I needed the same peace I had seen in my brother's eyes. I said I needed the truth, whatever the cost. No light came, no voice, but something settled inside me that night that I have no other word for except peace. The same peace, the impossible peace. And I slept without nightmares for the first time in 2 years. 3 years and 5 months after my arrest, they released me, a passport, a plane ticket to Istanbul, and $500. My house was confiscated, my accounts frozen, my name erased from every institution I had served. In Istanbul, homeless and unknown, I wandered through the Fatih district one afternoon and heard Arabic voices singing. I followed the sound to a small building with a cross above the door. I stood at the entrance, unable to move, and then I heard a voice call my name from inside. My brother was sitting in the third row. We ran toward each other across that small church and held on for a long time. His wife and both children were there, all four alive, all four safe. The little girl who cried silently on that platform was sitting in a church pew, completely at peace, drawing in a small notebook. That night, over a meal they prepared with the little they had, my brother told me something I have carried every day since. He said God had not bent those swords only to save his physical life. He said God had bent them to save mine. He was right. To every Christian reading or watching this, please stop right now and pray for every believer sitting in a cell, waiting for a sentence, hiding their faith behind locked doors across the Islamic world and beyond. Their suffering is real. Their courage is extraordinary. Your prayer is not a small thing. It reaches the God who bends steel. And if something in this story has touched something deep inside you, pray the simple prayer right now, wherever you are. Jesus, I believe you are real. I believe you are the God who bends the impossible. Forgive my sins. Come into my life and change me. I give you everything I am. Amen. If you prayed that, you are now part of the most unbreakable family on earth. Find a Bible. Find believers near you. You are not walking alone. Please share this story. Someone in your life needs to know that God still does the impossible. Like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep bringing these testimonies to the people who need them most.